Hello and welcome to Gefet in Daf Yomi. I'm Rabbanit Yael Shimoni, bringing to you Rabbanit Chana Godinger-Dreyfus's shir on Rashi and Tosfot in our Daf Yomi, and we're in Masachet Chagiga, and we'll be looking into a very interesting machloket regarding Birkat Kohanim that takes place in the second chapter of Masachet Chagiga, and we will see that this machloket deals with a very interesting question: where is the Shechina nowadays in Birkat Kohanim? So let's begin. Our sugya in Daf Tet Zayin Amud Aleph is based on the Mishna in Bet Aleph, the Mishna of the first parak of the second parak in Masachet Chagiga in Dorshin. This is a very, very, very famous Mishnah, and it speaks about different things that you're allowed to teach. And we see that you can't teach everything to everyone and not teach everything to everyone in the same way. And this is the famous Mishnah. Ein dorshim arayot בשלושה, ולא במעשה בראשית בשניים, ולא במעשה מרכבה ביחיד, אלא אם כן היה חכם ומבין מדעתו. You can't give a shir and arayos to more than two people. If you're teaching three, it's already a problem. You can't teach Maaseh Bereshit with two people. You can only choose one student. And Merkava, you're not allowed to teach even one person. But our sugya is not dealing with the Resha of the Mishnah, but with the Seifa. Let's look at the Seifa. כל המסתכל בארבעה דברים ראוי לו כאילו לא בא לעולם. מה למעלה, מה למטה, מה לפנים ומה לאחור, וכל שלא חס על כבוד קונו, ראוי לו שלא בא לעולם. Says the Mishnah, anyone who looks at four things, it is better for him that he would not have come to this world at all. What's up and what's down, what's before and what's behind. What is the Mishnah talking about? The Mishnah is talking about all kinds of questions that we might have about how this world is working. How did it come to be? Questions about God. And here the Mishnah says, anyone who looks at these things is a problem. What is the meaning of looking? Obviously, looking here is not talking about physical looking, because we cannot look physically at the past or the future or things that are above us or things that are under us. Looking here is in the meaning of understanding and thinking. But now, if we'll move to the Gemara, we'll see that the Gemara takes this idea of thinking as looking and moves to talk about things that we actually physically see. Says the Gemara the following: Darash Rav Yehuda ורבי נחמני מתורגמינא דריש לקיש. כל המסתכל בשלושה דברים עיניו כהות בקשת ובנשיא ובכהנים. בקשת דכתיב כמראה הקשת אשר יהיה בענן, ביום הגשם הוא מראה דמות כבוד אדוני. בנשיא דכתיב ונתת מאודך עליו. המסתכל בכהנים בזמן שבית המקדש קיים, שהיו עומדים על דוכנן ומברכים את ישראל בשם המפורש. So what's written here? Rav Yehuda Rabbi Nachmani, he was the Meturgeman of Rish Lakish. What's a Meturgeman? You can be a very good teacher, but not very good at talking to students. You might stand somewhere and have a low voice, or even be very, very wise, but the way that you say things is a way that people don't understand. So in the time of the Gemara, every big Chacham had a Meturgeman. The Meturgeman was a person, was a translator, but in what sense a translator? He would repeat what the Rav said quietly to the entire group if he would be speaking in public. So here, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Nachmani, he was this Meturgeman translator of Reish Lakish, but of course the translator himself is a Talmid Chacham and a Rav, and here we have a Torah of the translator. And what does the translator tell us, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Nachmani? He tells us that there are three things that physically you're not allowed to stare at, and if you will, your eyes will become slightly blind. What are these things? Keshet, rainbow, Nasi, the Nasi of Am Yisrael, and the Kohanim, and explains the sugya why. And when we speak about the Kohanim, he says the following: in the time of the Bet Mikdash, Birkat Kohanim, the Kohanim would be using the special name of God, Shema Meforash. And when they do that in the Bet HaMikdash, if you look at their hands, you might become blinded. Here we see that what Rav Yehuda bar Nachmani did, he moved from talking about thinking, seeing in the sense of thinking, to really seeing physically. Rashi here takes this idea a little step forward because Rashi's asking, why is looking at the Kohanim causing this problem? The Kohanim are actually covered. And here Rashi says that the problem is not looking at the Kohanim. The problem is looking at their fingers. Says Rashi the following, מברכים את העם בשם המפורש, שהשכינה שורה על קשרי אצבעותיהם. Rashi says that when the Kohanim bless the people with Shem HaMeforash, something happens to their hands. The Shechina comes down and is lying in their fingers, Kishrei Etzba'otehem, which is somewhere over here in my fingers. So this is a very interesting Rashi, and of course he's taking this idea and this drasha to a very, very mystical place. Tosfot here, Dibur HaMatchil BaKohanim, asks a question on the Perishabashi. Says the Tosfot, Mikan kashe al Perush Rashi, בפרק ג' דמגילה, על ההיד אתנן ידיו בוהקניות, לא יישא כפיו. Okay, Tosfot tells us, this sugya is a kushya and Rashi and somewhere else. Okay, so before we continue, first, let's learn the other sugya. Let's see what Rashi did there. And then we can go back to the Tosfot and see what is Tosfot's question on Rashi, which is Bichlal in Masechet Megillah. So we're going to Masechet Megillah, Daf Chaf Daled Amud Bet, and then we have a Mishnah that we've just learned recently. So let's remember the Mishnah together, and this is fun when we already had a few Masechta behind us that we can use from our learning and repeat it while we learn our new daf. So the Mishnah says the following, Kohen, sheyosh beyadav mumin, lo yisa et kapav. Rabbi Yehuda omer, af mi shehayu yadav tzvuot, istis ufua, lo yisa et kapav, mipnei she'a'am mistaklim bo. The Mishnah has two statements. Tana Kama says, a Kohen that has mumin, that has some kind of a problem in his hands, the hands ourselves are broken or have problems, he cannot be noseh kapayim. Rabbi Yehuda says not only if the actual body has a problem, also let's say we have a Kohen who is a painter, or he's a dyer, he dyes clothes in red or in blue. Sometimes people who work with their hands become dirty from their work. Rabbi Yehuda says even if there's no problem with the physical hand, but there's a very strong color of the hand, if it's blue or red, he cannot be noseh kapayim. Why? Because people look at his hands. So we have two different ideas here in the Mishnah. One is the thing that maybe Kohanim cannot be balei mumim, or maybe the hands of Kohanim cannot be balei mum, because here in Birkat Kohanim, that's the part of their body that they're doing this work of avodat kohanim. That's in Tana Kama. But Rabbi Yehuda says it's not a problem. It's not only an issue whether or not you have a physical problem. It's also if you have something that is causing attention, people look at you, that might also be problematic in looking at the hands. Rashi here says the following. What is the problem? Why does Rabbi Yehuda think that people cannot look at the kohanim's hands? Says Rashi, I'll tell you. From our sugya. Rashi says, לפי שהעם מסתכלים בו ואמרינן במסכת חגיגה, דף ט"ז עמוד א', המסתכל בכהנים בשעה שנושאים את כפיהן עיניו כהות, לפי שהשכינה שורה על ידיהם. So, how does Rashi explain Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah and Megillah? He says, Rabbi Yehuda is afraid that people will notice the blue or the red or the strange hands of the Kohen, and that will cause them to look. Why don't we want that? Because if they will look, what will happen? They will see the Shekhinah, and then their eyes might become blind. So that's why we cannot have somebody who is causing us to look, which is causing attention, because we don't want the physical attention of the people looking at the Kohanim. So now let's go back to Tosfot and see. Tosfot thinks that the sugya in Masechet Megillah is not working with our Mishnah. Why? What's the problem? Because, says the Tosfot, מכאן קשה על פירוש רש"י, בפרק ג' דמגילה, על ההיא דתנן ידיו בו הקרניות לא יישא כפיו, ופירוש, משום שהעם מסתכלים בו, ואמרינן בחגיגה מסתכל בכהנים בשעה שנושאים כפיהן עיניו כהות. Up till now, Tosfot in our daf quoted Rashi that we just learned. And now Tosfot will ask a question and say that what Rashi says is not true. Why? He has a kushya. Veha leita. This is not true. ומסכינן דווקא בזמן שבית המקדש קיים, ואילו התם בגבולים, מכמה כשמיני בגמרא מההיא, דבשביבותא דרבי הונא ואבי פריס ידי, ומשנה דילמה דש בעירו הווה. Says the Tosfot, Rashi is wrong. Why is Rashi wrong? Because Rashi is saying that the Mishnah here is talking about the Shechina in the hands of the Kohanim. But, says Tosfot, I'll prove to you that this is not true. Why? Because our Mishnah in Masechet Chagiga talked about the Shechina only at the time of the Bet Mikdash. The Mishnah said when Bet HaMikdash was Kayam, the Kohanim would be blessing with the Shema Mefurash, and then the Shechina would come down to their hands. But here in Masechet Megillah, says Tosfot, if you'll read the continuation of the Gemara, you will see that Rabbi Yehuda spoke about times that Bet HaMikdash was not there. He spoke about Kohanim at Shul. How do we know that? Because in the continuation of the Gemara in Megillah, he's talking about Rav Huna. Rav Huna had in his Shul a Kohen, which had problematic hands, and still the Kohen went and davened and blessed the people, and that was okay. Why? The Gemara there says, because people know this Kohen. Since they know the Kohen and they know his hands, they won't look at his hands because they're used to him. He's dash biro. They're used to him. So we learned a few very important things from Tosfot. A, Tosfot thinks and proves from the Gemara that the problem that a Kohen has when he's doing blessing at shul is not a problem of Avodat HaMikdash. There's no problem if your hands are problematic. It's not like a Kohen Baal Mum. The story is totally different. Whether or not people look at you or not has nothing to do with Avodat Bet HaMikdash. Also, Tosfot says it has nothing to do with Shechina. Why? Because the Shechina is on the hands of the Kohanim only in Bet HaMikdash. And at shul, there's no Shechina there in their hands. We're talking about something else. What are we talking about? Let's continue in Tosfot and see how he explains this sugya. Tosfot says, נראה לפרש, דאף בגבולין מצר, משום מסך הדת. Tosfot says, I have a very different explanation, prosaic answer, how to understand this sugya. The problem there in Megillah, that Rav Yehuda said you can't look at the hands, is because that if people look at the Kohanim hands and start to look, oh, what's happening to his hands, they won't have kavanah in the bracha. When I listen to Birkat Kohanim, I have to be mitkaven. I can't have my eyes distracted and my mind distracted by the way the Kohen looks. That's why Rabbi Yehuda says there's a problem. If the Kohen's hands look differently, it might cause people to look at his hands, start thinking of his hands, and not think about the bracha, which is what they're supposed to do. So this is a very different answer from Rashi. Rashi spoke about the Shechina. Tosfot is talking about just distraction. What's Tosfot's proof? Let's see. Tosfot says this is what's written in the Yerushalmi. דהתם אמר רבי יוסי, הדה אמרה שאסור להסתכל בכהנים בשעה שמברכים את העם. אמר רבי חגי, כלום אמר אלא משום היסך, אנא מסתכל ולא מסחה דעתי. In the Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yossi says what Rabbi Yehuda said in our Mishnah, and he says that you're not allowed to look at the Kohanim. Rabbi Chagai said, this problem of looking at the Kohanim, it's a problem of Hesech Hadat. It's a problem of Kavana. I have strong Kavana, so I look at the Kohanim. Okay, so what do we have here? We have a very interesting machloket between Rashi and Tosfot. We have a machloket how to read our Mishnah in Masechet Chagiga and how to read the Mishnah in Megillah. In Megillah and here in Chagiga, Rashi says that the problem of looking at the Kohanim is because they are seeing the Shechina. Tosfot says, no, Chagiga is talking about that question of the Shekhinah. That is true. But if you're in shul, there is not a problem because of the Shekhinah. There's a different problem that you have to be mitkaven. Rashi thinks that these two sugyot are talking exactly about the same thing. The sugya in Megillah and the sugya of Chagiga, both of them are talking about the Shekhinah. Tosfot says, no, Chagiga is talking about the Mikdash. That's about Shechina, true. But Megillah is talking about a totally different thing. Rashi takes the sugya in Megillah and uses the sugya and Chagiga to explain it. And Tosfot, how does he explain the sugya? He uses the Yerushalmi. But here, finally, we reach the deep and interesting point of the machloket. According to Rashi, obviously, he thinks that there is no difference between Bet HaMikdash and shul when it comes to having Shechina in the hands of the Kohanim. According to Rashi, he must agree with Tosfot that the Sugya and Megillah is talking about shul. And in shul, we don't have Bet HaMikdash, we don't have Shem Furash, and still Rashi explains the problem regarding the Shechina. So according to Rashi, even nowadays, when the Kohanim are not using Shem Furash and they're standing in shul in front of us, there is Shechina in their hands. Tosfot, however, says no. Shechina is only a Bet HaMikdash. Here in shul, we don't have Shechina. We have Kavana. It's very important, Birkat Kohanim, but we're not in the mystical world. The Shechina is not there. So this machloket between Rashi and Tosfot, we see, it's a machloket between Sod and Galui. Rashi says that in our shul there is a Sod of Shechina. Also nowadays, also in Gevuli, when the Kohanim are blessing. And Tosfot says no. That's only in Bet HaMikdash, and the Sugya and Megillah is talking about something totally else. So this is a very beautiful, sweet machloket between Rashi and Tosfot that we can also see how they learn. Rashi is explaining the Gemara according to the Gemara here in the Bavli, and Tosfot is bringing the Yerushalmi. And a deep, deep question, what is happening in shul today? So I hope you enjoyed our learning, and take care and continue enjoying this beautiful Masechet Chagiga. Good Shabbos.